Om. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavit Rishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaయ Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostu Te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrudaduhe Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyah Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So, we are in the portion of the 9th chapter, which is really coming to the last section. But today we will start to talk more about what is the glory of bhakti, So what is the glory of devotion? And last time, that is about 2 weeks ago, we just started to look at the 30th verse. We had finished 29th, we just started actually, where Krishna starts to explain really this glory of bhakti. And he actually will start to say about how, for bhakti, really there is nothing required. Anybody can start with bhakti with any level of spirituality. He can even start with, materialism. So, which is probably where we see in the beginning, right? So when we see people going to the temples in big numbers, and again, as having come back just from Ayodhya and Kashi, I can tell you, when you see the sea of humanity literally going to these temples, you know, is everyone going there only because they just want to see the beautiful face of that baby Rama? Are they going there just to enjoy the beauty of that Rama? Or are they going to the Kasi Vishwanath temple because they believe completely in moksha and surrender? Is that where they're going? May not necessarily be, right? Because it all depends upon the level of evolution and progress within ourselves. Like Swami Vivekananda would say, first make sure that everyone is fed with food, right? It starts with food. Make sure everyone is not hungry. Make sure everyone has a roof on their heads. So it starts with that, what we have seen even in the previous chapters, what is called as the Artha Bhakti. Artha Bhakti is somebody who is looking for something to satisfy their immediate need. So bhakti can start at that point where I'm praying to the Lord to give me that little amount to remove my suffering. And once that suffering is removed, give me something to satisfy my need. And once the need is satisfied, of course, we get into this level of want, right? So it goes through that progress of where, and that's where we start to recognize that there is somebody who is beyond me who can actually help me satisfy what I want. So he starts at that point of that Artha Bhakti. So whenever there's a problem, we take it to the God, to the Lord, and then I get that support. And so, Krishna assures that for everyone there is that support. So bhakti actually starts with that. And then from there on, we graduate to what we call as this Artharthi Bhakti. And then to the Jignasu Bhakti. So these are all the terminologies that we have seen before. And then finally, the Jnani Bhakti. So depending upon what our need is, to that extent, I am that spiritual. So to that extent, so everything, is always is given in the last few chapters, and particularly in the ninth chapter, he really addresses the highest level of bhakti. And of course, along this level of bhakti, there are qualities that we develop. And the simplest and the basic of qualities that we develop is humility. Humility which leads to this gratitude. So even though, as a human being, we think that we are the most powerful person, that I can go up to Mars and I can start building colonies on the moon, all these things, we may have that aspect of it, but there is something which is much, much more powerful than all of us. And bhakti gives you that step ladder to reach that level of the highest progress in the human life, which is that moksha or renunciation. So that is the glory of bhakti that, we are really seeing in this chapter. And the last thing really echoes that part of it. So about 2, 3 weeks ago, when we started to talk about bhakti, Meena, who is here, and I really want to, she sent me this beautiful note, and I'm going to have her explain this aspect of it, where, we talked a lot about this surrender principle. So she sent this beautiful note about this picture here, where you see, this person who's driving this cow cart, of course, we talk about bullock carts. Here we are seeing the cow cart, and here he's driving this. And she sent this thing in Tamil. So I'm going to have her explain it, and then I will actually put the English one also. So Meena, would you like to explain what, how is this related to bhakti and the surrender principle itself?
Yes, Hari Om. So, what we see in this card is it's a simple way to surrender to God, meaning a person is carrying some heavy load in a two-cow cart. The cart, it's not a living object or anything, whereas the cow is a living creature and it has true knowledge. But the cartman who's sitting in the cart, he's driving the cart. He's driving a non-living object, which is the cart, and locking the knowledge of the cow, because the cow has knowledge, but it doesn't do anything. It's all controlled by the cartman. So he decides, he's the person, he's deciding how much of weight the cart can have and where he wants to go, from where he has to start, where is the destination, everything. So the cartman is the deciding authority. Whereas the cow, though it has knowledge and all that, but it is just used as an object to carry the heavy load. Mm-hmm. Similarly, in our life, the cart, which is our body, is locked by our Atma. And the Lord is the cartman. Lord Krishna is a cartman. He is the one who's controlling our Atma. And he's the ultimate person who decides where our journey starts, where we have to start, where it has to end, how much of load our life can take. He's actually everything. He's the deciding authority. So when we were born in this world, he knows this so and so person should be born on this date, and he has to undergo so and so on during his life tenure, and then he has to attain moksha on this date. So he is the ultimate person. So if we know this concept, then ultimately we can just say surrender to the Lord, and whatever that is in Bhagavad Gita, as it says, what is what has happened is for good, what is happening is for good, what is going to happen in the future, everything is for good. So if we understand this concept, the simple cartman, that's the end of it. So we can straight away say, hold the feet of the Lord and say, hey, I'm surrendering to you, and whatever you're doing for me is going to be good for me. If we understand this, then absolutely there's nothing in life. That's what I feel.
Beautiful, very nice. So a
Thank
lot
you.
of thank you so much for sharing this, because it's now the picture of this person driving the two cows with that huge load at the back. If we keep that in mind and we understand that who are we in this equation, what is really my role becomes so clear, right?
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
that huge mountain of hay is uh, is can be looked at in so many different ways. Here we have the cartman, who is Krishna, who is really responsible for that big, huge bundle of vasanas of the entire universe. And
Yeah.
we are this two cows, I guess, driving. And I think I'm driving the cart, but actually it is Lord Krishna who is driving the
Yes.
cart, right? That is the analogy here. Just a few things, which is, like you said, by just the two cows, they surrender to the cartman. They just go by how he's doing it. And that's the same thing for us too. And that is the humility and the surrender principle that is required, right?
But as a layman, we think we are controlling the two cows, we are controlling everything. But actually speaking, if you think about it, it's nothing. We are not doing anything.
Right.
Nobody above us is controlling everything.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So,
Somehow I like this, so I just thought I'll share with you,
yes,
especially in this concept when you said bhakti is just surrender to God, and
correct.
and then he said, you hold my feet, I'll take care of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was
Yeah.
just relevant to this. I thought I'll share with you.
Correct. Correct. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you
It's a
very much.
very, really
Harvam,
very,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, Anand.
Yeah, it's a nice example. It looks like there's a huge load, and then once the we leave to God, the load is taken care.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. And I think what what is particularly, it's a very this concept of surrender, we think it is a very, very simple thing. Anybody can surrender. But we are unable to surrender because of this powerful ego within us, which is
Yes.
always coming in front and saying that, hey, you Sunitha, you have to change things, you have to do this. So in some sense, from the Western world, right? The Western world is actually giving a lot of power to us and making us feel that, we are responsible for our life, which is fantastic, which is really, really good. But there is a point in this curve where I have to think that, yes, I'm very powerful. I can do things. And this is important thing for me to develop the self-confidence and the self-esteem, you know. But at some point, I have to recognize that I am now confident, but I'm actually part of the world. And that's where that change of self-confidence to humility has to develop. If that part of the curve is not understood well, then it can lead to a lot of arrogance, which is what happens to, which is what, if it is not taught well, it can lead to a lot of dire consequences. So it's a very powerful emotion. Bhakti is happens only when I start to develop the humility and the gratitude, you know. So yeah, this is the English explanation which beautifully Meena had said. So now, like I said, we are coming to that last portion where we did this 26, 27, 28, where the bhakti aspect of it really is explained, about in verse 26, where me as a person can start developing that bhakti by the surrender principle, so to speak, by starting to offer, whatever I'm doing, like in the Jagdishwara Aarti, Tera Tujhko Arpada, I am only giving back to the Lord what He has given to me in abundance. It's not that as if I'm doing this great thing of charity and everything where I'm doing this great thing of helping the world. It's not that. I'm just giving back. So, in that sense, this verse 26, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, when he starts to explain, he's saying that, it can start with the simplest of offerings. Just a leaf from my own garden, you give it back to me. Give me a fruit, anything that you can offer. So, and then the second thing, 27 goes is a little more involved bhakti, which is now all the actions. Earlier, it is something where I'm offering as a material thing. But in verse 27, he starts to say that, even this act of offering, just give it to me. So even that, just keeps like the Navabhakti thing that we have in Bhagavatam, which is explained, the Kirtanam, Padasevanam, that verse, that beautiful verse, every action, let it be that I'm doing it for you, O Krishna. So whether I'm serving my own family or whether I'm serving somebody in the office, whether I'm, whoever is coming in front of me, even my act of saying Hari Om to somebody, everything is just offering that actions to, as if I'm offering it to Krishna. And this last verse in the series, which is 28, is even the fruit of surrendering, which is when I'm offering something to the Lord, the feeling that I have of, what should I say, the feeling of peace and everything, even that I'm offering it to Krishna. So I have nothing, absolutely no baggage in me at all, So that's the beauty of this whole set of 26, 27, and 28. Um, you know, we talk about how we come here with the baggage. Now, how do I get rid of this baggage? Is I start to doing this three things here. I'm offering whatever I have. My action of offering is also given up. And finally, whatever the feeling that I get out of, even that I'm giving up. So I keep nothing with me, So that's the 26, 27. And now is this aspect of this glory that we're discussing. And today we will look into these verses 30 even more carefully, and the story of Angulimala, which we will see also, which last time I just started to speak about it. So 28, like we said, is the result of this Nishkama Bhakti. Nishkama Bhakti is with absolutely no doing something without any desire for myself. And we actually discussed last time about the comparison of Karma Yoga and this Bhakti Yoga. So you see how both Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are leading to the same thing, In third chapter or even second chapter, when we started to talk about Karmanye, Vadikaraste and everything, we were talking about how to do anything without any expectation. But the ego is still very much intact. But here we are saying about that even offering all the results, whatever it is, to that Lord, you take it away from me. Just let me be completely without anything. So just that will lead to the most important purpose of our human life. And the purpose of a human life is this vimuktaha, vimukta, to be liberated. So that is where the Shubha, Ashubha, Pala, Evam, So Shubha and Ashubha meaning that, any kind of material prosperity I get, or anything which is whatever which is I'm supposed to receive this Shubha, maybe if there's any papam that comes to me also, even that I'm offering to you. So, and that's the whole idea which he says is leading us to that moksha phalam, So, but moksha phalam is not something that I can offer it back. Moksha phalam is the ultimate phalam of the whatever I do. So, when we talk about that kind of phalam, or that kind of the fruit, or something which it is not something that I can get it in Myers or anything, it's not, if I mean, it's a joke. I mean, if Costco or Myers were to carry this product of moksha, there would be nothing, everyone would be out of business. So this can be obtained only when I turn away from all the things that lure me into the world. So it can be obtained only when I start to take that love that I have for material things and turn that attention straight back to Krishna, you know. And this can happen slowly, which is why in Balavihars, we start with explaining or, developing the bhakti for the many gods, Khate bi Rama koho, Pite bi Rama koho, those kind of beautiful songs, where we start to get the child to understand that there is a power way, way beyond. And slowly, I have to develop that feeling that ultimately I'm not here for anything else. I'm only seeing Krishna, Krishna everywhere. Again, this is another beautiful thing we teach in Balavihar. Krishna here, Krishna there, Krishna, Krishna everywhere. Through all these, I start to develop that feeling for wanting that God very, very desperately. There's nothing else. That mumukshutva, that develops. So from this, that slowly the baggage in me starts to disappear. I start to develop that purity. And when that mind becomes pure, that wanting for that Lord becomes even much more. So that's the yoga of renunciation, which is in chapter 6, Anashrita Karma Phalam, Karyam Karma Karoti, Sir Sannyasi Cha Yogi, sir. Both of them, which really talks about how it is that purity which is what really makes a person a sannyasi. We start to drop all this anxieties we have in the world, the anxiety that, oh my God, I hope this goes well, that goes well. That anxiety itself is dropped completely because that purity has been developed, and we recognize that ultimately, as Meena said before, that we know what my role is. I completely surrendered to that Lord. And by this, that karma yogi, the karma becomes really liberated. So the karma yoga is the step towards going forward, but it's ultimately only by the pure understanding, the jnana yoga, which is what we are coming to in the third phase of Bhagavad Gita, that this happens, so yoga vimuktaha bhavati, he attains a purity, he attains through this knowledge that ultimately there is none other than that Lord everywhere. So that to understand that mam upaishyasi, that is, he actually, once he understands that it's Krishna, Krishna everywhere, then the person merges into that Krishna. He becomes one with me. That's what he's saying. Mam upaishyasi, But when we think about this word mam upaishyasi, or this merger, it is not like the mergers and acquisitions that happens in the world, In typical mergers and acquisitions, every part of the merger remains independent. They come together, but they're still kind of independent. But here, there's a complete merger, so that's the part that needs to be carefully understood here, which is the highest level of bhakti that one attains, that to understand that the Lord is not far away from me. The Lord is not only that idol. The Lord is, very close to me. And he's so close that he is me. That to that extent is, it cannot get any closer than this one. So this Aham Brahma Asmi, that aspect is what he's coming here to say, that it is the absolute closest. It's so close that he is me or I am him. To that extent, he's trying to say that, that that level of merger is what is talked about in this Mam Upaishyasi. So from this last 4 shlokas from 29 onwards, we then finally see that in the 6 verses, he starts to talk this glory so much that he says, this glory of bhakti is available to just about everyone, and that how he's not very partial or anything, he's extremely approachable. And so he says, sammoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshyasti dveshosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mayi te teshu cha api aham. So he starts to say that it is not that he's partial to anybody. Samaha aham sarva bhuteshu. I am the same to all beings. And from my standpoint, maybe from your standpoint, you might be looking at me saying that, how come, you're more partial to my neighbor? You're giving a lot more things to him. Look at me, I'm going through so much of issues. He says, no, to me, from my standpoint, you're all the same to me. But then he says, but ultimately but those who worship me with complete devotion, with completely no anxieties, no wanting anything else, for such a person, he says you will reach that highest peak, the highest peak of success or highest peak, and that is Mai te teshu cha api aham. And we've seen this again in 7 chapters also, you are in me, I'm in, I'm also in them. So he says, but those worship in this one, they are in me and I am also in them. Completely, that understanding really comes. And that is what he says, Sarva Bhuteshu Aham, Sarva Bhuteshu Aham Samaha. So I really treat everyone. I don't have any differences at all. Dveshaha. Dveshaha meaning that there is no hatred, of course. But here he's saying that, Dveshaha, I don't see any difference. There is no two-ness for me. We know that, the comparison, the judgment, everything happens only when I consider somebody different from me. So here he says, Dveshaha na asti. Absolutely, there is no difference at all. I'm completely available. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about this beautiful example that Swami Chinmayananda gives, which is sunlight, for example, is available for everybody. It is not as if, only some plants get some sunlight. Again, I see the beauty out here. There's so many mango trees. Some mango trees are flowering like anything. Some mango trees give small, some gives big fruits. Everything, you see the difference. It's only from the mango tree perspective, but from the sunlight perspective, sun is not partial at all, And na priyaha, he says, I don't have any favorites. You are all the same. You're all the same bhaktis for me. So, he says, ye mam bhaktya bhajanti. So for those people who ever praise for me, ye mam bhaktya, whoever considers me as the most important. It's like in school too, right? Kids, sometimes they cry. They say that, this teacher is a favorite and that teacher is a favorite. When the student starts to do things for the teacher automatically feels very special, right? And so the teacher does things for the student. This is in the case of material ways. And so too for all of us, when I start to give up our attention, our attention is only one. We all have only X amount of energy to give to anybody. And if I focus that whole energy on Krishna, so automatically Krishna does things for me, as simple as that. So na priyaha, the teacher doesn't have any favorites, Krishna doesn't have any favorites. He just continues to do what he has to do. So mayite teshu cha api aham, which as I said in the 7th chapter, he starts to sing, he says, I'm in them and they are in me. We are never ever separate. Like even between two closest friends, the way they treat each other, the same thing. Here we have seen that love, what Krishna has for Arjuna, and we have seen what Krishna has that love for Sudama, all these stories. So he says we are never ever separate and there is no distance at all between us. So moksha, that what we talked about, this renunciation, at the end of the day is something that is really attained ultimately when I start to absolutely drop those boundaries, those walls. The ultimate moksha is where I recognize that you and I are the one and the same. That's what Krishna is telling Arjuna ultimately. So with this, with the shloka number 29, he starts to completely, he is first explain what is bhakti with wanting something, which is a desire oriented, and nishkama bhakti, which is nothing, I don't want anything else, Krishna, I only want you. So that whole evolution and the whole progress, everything, he has started to explain. So in this final portion of 30, he basically starts to talk about the glory of bhakti. And I guess I don't need to really recap bhakti, which finally we said, how it starts with, it can start at any level. And so in Shloka 30, he starts to explain about how bhakti is the most easiest means to obtain access to get to Krishna, And he says it's so easy that even a criminal, even the biggest sinner in the world, and we have seen that in our own stories, with Valmiki and everyone, the minute we start to worship Krishna as only Krishna, and that is the only thing I want, it is the easiest way to access that highest level of evolution or moksha. So, and he starts to also say that for bhakti, there are no prerequisites at all. Anybody can do it. Anybody can practice it. A person can be very rich. A person can be somebody who has a lot of property. A person who can be extremely smart, intelligent. Anybody can do it. And he says that, if a person has a lot of sort of bad conduct, even if he's even the worst of all the sinners, but if he starts to worship Ishvara with that single pointed devotion, that that aspect, that attitude, what he has, will really uplift him as a saint. Like I said, Valmiki is a classic example, and he uses words like Ananya Bhak. Ananya Bhak means total Ananya. Ananya means without the focus uh, of focusing on one aspect. So that person who shifted his attention from all the worldly pursuits, or even as he's pursuing things in the world, seeing Krishna everywhere, So it's just an attitudinal change in our mind. That is what it is. So such a person, even in his worldly pursuits, starts to look at only Krishna, Krishna everywhere. So such a person is what he talks about. So he says, I don't know if he chanted last time. Api ched suduracharah, api ched suduracharah, bhajate mam ananya bhag, Bhajate mam ananya bhag sadhureva cha mantavyah sadhureva cha sadhureva samantavyah samyak vyavastito hi saha samyak vyavastito hi saha. So he says, apichet. What if there is? Apichet is a kind of a standard phrase which is used in the phrases, when somebody is trying to say, what if, what if there is somebody who's suduracharaha, somebody who is of extremely poor conduct, somebody who is kind of bad character or whatever, right? Suduracharaha, even such a person, if he just prays to me, Ananya Bhak, with complete devotion, he too would be regarded sadhuhu eva saha. Sadhu mantavyaha would be considered. So he would be considered as a sadhu, for he is chosen the right path. It's only so you see the focus in the shloka is the attitude. That's all it is. So the person has to just develop the attitude of ultimately that I'm not the greatest. There's somebody who is much greater than me, and I bow down completely to that power. So that attitudinal change is done, then that person has a chance to move forward. That's the simplest of things, simplest thing that somebody has to do here. So here, this story of Angulima. Does anybody know the story or? Um, so this story is about actually, somebody Angulimala. He actually lived at the time of Lord Buddha. Okay. And his name itself actually is kind of an introduction to this character. He was actually a robber and he used to kill people. And he's Anguli. Anguli means the thumb, right? So he used to make Anguli mala. He used to make a mala of all the Angulis of his victims and he used to wear it. So one day, this man who brought so much of fear into the hearts of people because of his actions, he saw Buddha walking. So he walked behind Buddha with this intention to really hurt him. And so when Buddha saw this man, he started walking a little fast, not because he was afraid. He knew who this person was. He just wanted to kind of teach him a lesson in a very compassionate way. So when he started walking fast, Angulimala also started walking fast. And he literally started running behind Buddha. And Buddha started walking even faster. And Angulimala was not able to really catch up. He said, stop, stop. So at that point, Buddha turned around and faced him very calmly. And he said, I have stopped. Okay, I have stopped here. But have you? Have you really stopped? So this is way of Buddha's teachings, right? Very simple, cryptic words. We have to understand what the depth of what he's trying to say. So in some ways, you see how Angulimala was running and running behind him. He was trying to chase somebody who was so pure and compassionate. And in some ways, Angulimala seemed to understand what Buddha was trying to tell him. So he immediately says, can I become your disciple? And he becomes his disciple. But the people around Buddha, they knew who Angulimala was and they wanted justice. They said, you really cannot, take this person as your disciple. He's a sinner and everything. But to Angulimala, Buddha, advised that even though people say so much, he should not retaliate. Whatever people may say to him or to do anything to him, he should just accept it as a sort of a punishment for everything that he has done. So one day, finally, after Angulimala had spent enough time with Buddha, and he finally tells Buddha that, you should go now to a lady who had some severe pains, He asked him to tell aloud to this lady that if I, Angulimala, am pure, let this lady's pain go away. So Angulimala really did not accept it first. He was like, how can this be? How can really this happen? But then he said, okay, uh, the reason why he felt that way was because he still was feeling for all the bad things that he had done. So he sort of he expressed this to Buddha, how can I really do this? Do you think this is really going to happen? But then Buddha realized that it was that feeling that he had done so many negative things, was the only thing that was actually standing in his way for Angulimala to attain moksha. Okay. So he insisted. He said, no, 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 go, you go to that lady and I'll see what happens. So Angulimala then took that courage and he did what he was asked. He just completely sort of surrendered to Buddha and he said, okay, let me do what Buddha is telling me to do. So he goes there and he says what Buddha asked him to say. So immediately the lady's pain actually stopped and Angulimala was completely freed from his sin. So the only thing that was stopping him from doing what Buddha had asked him to do was, in his mind, he had that feeling that, how come this is true? Will this really work? But when Buddha told him, no, just drop it, just drop that feeling. And so and he did that. And he could see that and that evidence of the lady dropping getting over the pain gave him complete sort of understanding what the surrender really means. So it is that simple to be able to give up that notion. So that is what he's saying, Bhajate Mam Ananya Bhak. Whoever is praising me and whoever is coming to me, that is the biggest thing that is actually highlighted in this. And each one of us, we have that aspect within us. Every human being actually suffers from this problem of this mental guilt. The guilt that, oh my God, I have done so much of mistakes. How come I can attain this liberation? Just like this Angulimala, we had that story of course, of Valmiki also. But the second I know that this is who I am and what is right and what is wrong, then that common sense really comes to us. And as we saw in these two examples, even a thief comes to know that, thieving is wrong. So he didn't have any education. He was not a PhD or anything, but all he knew was that was not right. And because he knew it is wrong, that itself, that thought itself takes you forward and it takes you to that level. So this is just this example to show that even a person who's suduracharaha can really have that ability to move forward. So any questions, or do you have any other stories that you want to share in this regard?
When you said, when Angli Mama said, I'm not, I have stopped, but when Buddha said, I have stopped, but you haven't stopped. So I didn't quite understand that.
So this is, I'll tell you another story and maybe that will explain this even better. So this is a Zen story, the Zen story is about how there is this master, Zen master, who's going with his disciple or walking on a beach. And as he was walking on the beach, suddenly they see this young, beautiful girl who was swimming and suddenly she just lost control and she calls for help. Okay. When she calls for help, immediately the master, without even thinking, just goes there, rescues the girl, takes her in the arms, and then brings her back to the beach and drops her there. And then he starts to walk along with the disciple. Okay. So after some time, this disciple, basically looks at the master and he says he couldn't contain within himself too long. This is like after almost walking for about an hour or something. He says, Master, what did you do? You actually touched a young girl there and you brought her and everything. You shouldn't be doing this or something like that. How can you do this? So the master calmly tells him, see, I dropped her there itself, but you have held on even now. Okay. So that is, so the point is in the mind, this disciple still had that feelings of whatever disgust or whatever things, and also at a high level of that egoistic
Oh.
aspect. So the master said, I dropped her there, but you're still carrying it. So the same
Yes.
thing which Buddha is telling Angulimala that, I have stopped here, but you have not stopped. Okay.
Okay.
You still
Now,
are
yes.
carrying so much baggage in your mind. You need to drop it. That baggage has to be dropped completely. And that is what he was working on Angulimala.
Okay.
So it is that as it's just an attitudinal change in our own minds. Um, you know, Again, Swami Chinmayananda very humorously gives us one example of how this young man, like a 40-year-old, young in the sense about 40, who was working so hard in an IT field and all that, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to drop everything and go to the Himalayas, meditate, and attain moksha. Okay. But even when he goes there, he starts to think about how he can now open another IT. He looks at Himalayas, there's nothing there for IT company or whatever, and he wants to start another IT outfit over there. Okay. He hasn't dropped that idea of who he was. So in the mind, that attitude change has to happen, and that can happen anywhere. We don't have to run away from materialism to get that attitude of dropping something, you know. So
Yeah,
that
that makes.
aspect is to drop that ego completely, you know. So bhajate mam ananya bhak, so keep on uh, think about the glories of me everywhere. Just see me everywhere, that aspect is what he's trying to bring about.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Hari Om.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hari Om. Yeah. In the context of complete surrender, something comes to my mind. I heard this somewhere. It's like a kid, a small kid starts crying, like, a year or two, kind of. So, and then, basically his dad and then his elder brother, they try to go, calm him down. So they take him, you know, they like a walk. They give him some toys, they try to do that, and then he won't stop crying. And then finally, the mom comes, then he stops crying. So like he doesn't want anything, he just wants his mom.
His
So,
mom.
I heard this somewhere. So it's like in the context of like, complete surrender. He doesn't want anything else. The bhakta, just the Bhagavan he wants.
Beautiful, beautiful, very simple story about just, I want my mommy. Meena, you had something to say here? Complete the thought process here?
Now I understood that process after you said the other story. So thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So ultimately, we have a lot of baggage in our mind. That baggage is what we need to get rid of. And any amount of just uh, indulging in the lower form of bhakti. So this is why the word bhakti has to be clearly understood. It is that ultimate merger, mam upaishisi, that word, that is why I highlighted over there. That complete merger with the Lord has to happen. That complete understanding that He's none other than me, myself, that Aham Brahmasmi. But when we start to indulge in the lower forms of bhakti for whatever I want to get in the material world, I'm never going to grow. So that's the baggage we have. The baggage is we running for small things, whereas Krishna is saying, I can give you the highest, the best of all the gifts. So that attitude change has to happen in our mind to recognize what my final goal is. What is my goal? What is it that I'm really running after? So that is why that goal seeking has to be important. What is my goal? Clearly. And we may, of course, say that, you may say my goal is Krishna, but I don't recognize it yet. That is what a lot of people will say. I don't recognize that my goal is Krishna. So how can you tell me that that is what I should be running after? That clarity of the goal itself comes only through purity of mind, and purity of mind comes only when I get rid of that baggage in my mind. So that is why these stories of Angulimala is important, because he had so much of thing in his mind that he is a sinner. Of course, in the beginning, he didn't think he was a sinner, right? That is why he was killing people and all that. But from there, somehow, that guru came into his life. Buddha came into his life, and he started running after Buddha. But then Buddha finally recognized that he had to, for him, he had to show that aspect of that power, of going to that lady and saying that I'll take care of the pain. So even that was, in some ways, um, God acting to show him that aspect. Now, we don't need those kind of miracles in order to prove it. And that is where the Jnana Yoga part of it, the coupling Jnana Yoga with Bhakti Yoga, really gives us even more clarity of vision and everything, So none of this is really, what should I say, very mystic or anything. It's not mystic. Everything is so beautifully explained. This philosophy, this religion helps us to reach that highest level of a goal. But for many people in the world, they are happy with small things. And that's why the progress is not always there. I think we are 2 minutes above, so we'll stop here. But if any thoughts you have on this one would be good, because this is, again, such a beautiful topic, Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Stop the live.